Provo City Board of Adjustment meeting for the month of November. We have one item on the agenda tonight. Staff have any that needs to be raised before we jump into items?
Item 2 is continued for something to get that. So what does that exactly mean withdrawn?
Yeah, no, I can repeat. So I don't have specifics in front of me, but there were two items tonight. The item regarding the fence allowance in Lakeview North is on our agenda tonight. There was another item regarding a variance request, I think, that that is not being heard tonight. That is
Not being heard.
right.
Is that expected that would be heard another evening?
I'm not sure if it was withdrawn or if it was continued. Been withdrawn.
So that means no, won't be heard another evening unless they resubmit.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Hey,
Appreciate your taking my time.
absolutely. Glad we could help you out. All right. Well, I will go ahead and read the item number 1 and our only item for the evening into the record. So Ryan Okelberry, requests a variance to section 14.34.5001A fencing standards for residential zones to allow a 6-foot fence in the front yard in the R120 zone, R120 one family residential zone located at 2948 West, 1520 North in the Lakeview North neighborhood. Before I turn it over to staff for their report, is there anyone who has a conflict of interest to declare? I do live in the Lakeview South neighborhood, but don't see any conflict. Right. Well, then let's turn it over to staff.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's the property that we're discussing tonight in item 1. So the property has a fence. Well, so here's the zoning. It's in the R120 zone. Fencing standards in this zone regarding to the front yard allow for a 3-foot fence on the property. The fence that's been constructed is a 6-foot fence and is not in compliance with the code. And so the request tonight is for a 3-foot increase to the height allowance to allow this fence to remain. That's what the applicant is seeking from the Board of Adjustment. So the subdivision on the property, you can faintly see there's some lines here and here on the property. So lot 4 is this property. And in the staff report, we talk about an easement along the property. And so that's where that's located. So for a variance to be granted, the Board of Adjustment needs to find that all 5 criteria for a variance have been met for you to be able to approve that variance. In the staff report, staff has gone through those 5 criteria and provided staff's responses there and analyzed the request to these standards. And for example, one of them would be the hardship is what we're looking for. And if that hardship is something that's naturally occurring on the property, or if it's something that's self-imposed. And so on this one, the fence was installed. And so that's something that was done by the property owner. It's not something that's naturally occurring on the property. So staff doesn't find this to meet the criteria of being a hardship. If it was also mentioned in the applicant's report, a response to the criteria that the cost of moving the fence would be a hardship for criteria for a variance to granted. financial reasons can't be part of that hardship. Staff also finds that the property still is able to be utilized as a single family property. As you can see, a home was built on the property. Fencing is allowed to be placed on a property that meets the current code to provide security and privacy on the property. The code just does not allow for fencing to be placed in this area that you see highlighted in red, because that's considered the front yard on this property. So that's the section of fencing that would not be permitted, and that's where the variance request is to allow that fence to be 6 feet as opposed to this 3 feet that the code allows. Other properties in the area are required to comply with the same code requirements of having a 3 foot tall fence in the front yard. The applicant has shown other properties in the neighborhood that have fencing on them that extends into areas that are similar to, I think, what they're seeing on their property. So they've shown some properties around that have fencing that's out adjacent to the sidewalk. I think in all these examples, these comply with a side yard fencing standard, which does allow for 6 feet by code. But these properties still would have to comply with the 3 feet in the front yard. So there's not a property right that's being permitted on others that's not on this one. And so staff doesn't see that a variance would be needed there to establish a property right that's shared by others and not on theirs. If you have any specific questions for me, I'd be happy to go over those, but
Westman came. I'm curious if we have a layman's definition of a front yard, because I mean, just based on kind of where houses are facing, whether they're on corners or not. Yeah, just kind of curious if there's.
Sure. Yeah. So if you look at the aerial on this property here, the street out front, this property line along the front of the property would be considered the front property line. And so the setback for the front
is that
yard,
based on the direction the house is facing?
correct. Yep.
Like, being on a corner, I mean, you could say this whole thing is the front yard.
Yeah. So for example, if the property were facing out onto this street here, if the home was built here, which it can't be because of that easement of power lines that run right here. That's why the home was built here. But just for an example, if it were built here, the front door faced here, this would be the front yard, and this would be a street side yard. So the front yard would be on this one, this front property line on the frontage of the street, and then setback to the front yard setback. And so within that area, the fence can only go to 3 feet in height. And if in this section here where it's red, it's gone to 6 feet. And so if it were brought back to the setback of the front to the house, it could be 6 feet here. Does that help answer your?
Yeah.
That was my question. It was, how far is the setback? Because, so you're saying the setback extends out, obviously you guys have mentioned that is right, because it's on the corner here.
But just anything that is kind of front of the foremost wall of the house.
Typically people will build the house right up to the front setback. I don't know on this one if that's what they did.
Okay, I understand.
But typically the front of the house is going to be built to that front setback line. The fence would extend from that point.
I was wondering what the distance is.
I don't know what the distance is on this one.
Well, just
but in the code, it's 23 feet behind curb or 14 feet behind the sidewalk, whichever of those two is greater. That's where that would be.
Any other questions for? Got to tap for the green light.
There we go. Okay. Dustin, it says that you haven't heard from the neighborhood. Was there a neighborhood meeting? I'm assuming this went to planning commission or maybe not. Did it come straight here?
No, it just comes to the variances come to the Board of Adjustments.
So
this is
there
the first
has been no neighborhood meeting about
that
it?
I'm aware of.
No complaints?
I haven't
Okay.
heard of.
I'd like to know if the applicant is aware of any of those as well.
Okay.
I also have a question.
Yes.
This is not in the main, most highly densely populated area of Provo. How did this come to the attention of, how did this become a complaint is what I'd like to know. Was it an anonymous? Because someone brought it to someone's attention. Do we know
Yes.
that?
Yeah. So staff with the city receives anonymous. We don't, they receive anonymous complaints, and that's how they go out and verify that the complaint is valid by doing an inspection of the property. If it is a valid complaint, then they will issue a letter to the property owner.
Okay, so we can safely assume that someone complained anonymously. Is that correct?
That would be my assumption.
Thank you.
No more questions. Why don't we invite our applicant up for?
Thank you, board.
Introduce your name and normally address, but I imagine this is your address.
Yeah. My name is Ryan Okelberry, the property owner here, 2948 West, 1520 North. I just want to address the last question from you, Jennifer, about we can assume that somebody had made a complaint. I don't think you could take an assumption as, we can speculate all we want. My assumption, if I'm going to assume something, is that a home along Geneva Road, just a block away, was sold to a new owner, and that new owner proceeded to put a new fence on the entire perimeter of their house. And it was about that same time that I got a complaint in the mail. And then not too long after that, this neighbor moved their fence back. So my assumption is that somebody complained about that house, and then that caused city to come out and present them with a violation. And then that house pointed their finger at my house. That's my assumption as to what happened. But again, it's speculation. I don't know. And if they're anonymous complaints, I mean, the city could be out driving and find a violation, or the anonymous complaints could be received. And the city isn't willing to say which one of those occurred. So just so some background on the property, my wife, Holly, she's here with me. I've got lots of neighbors supporting me. I appreciate them being here too. We bought the property in 2012 and built a home started building in 2013. The home was completed in 2014. And the improvements for the fence were put in place in 2014, the summer of 2014. So it's been about eight and a half years in violation of the code without seemingly any complaints. As you can see from the picture there, it is an odd shaped lot. It is odd shaped because of the easement. I mean, the east half of the property is effectively not usable, not buildable because of the easement. The easement extends, so those are high voltage power lines, and the easement extends 60 feet from the center line on either side. So there's a 120-foot swath of property there that cannot be used for building any permanent structures underneath. So it's odd shaped. In fact, many people from the neighborhood when we first moved in asked if it was a double lot just because of the length. So the lot is like 250 some feet long. So it's very odd shaped. Now, along the back fence, there is also an easement on what would be the north side on the top on your picture. There is also an easement there along the entire length of the top. with lake bottom irrigation. So that's another kind of restriction as to where permanent structures can be built. So the property's, it's pretty limited when you look at it in terms of where things can be built. And so from my perspective, that's a hardship. I can't use my property like other people in the neighborhood because they can build auxiliary buildings and other permanent structures, effectively wherever they want to on the property, as long as it conforms to the code. So the easement's pretty much dictated where the house sits on the property. And I think it's pretty subjective as to whether or not the lot can be used to its full potential. I mean, me as a property owner, what I want to do with my property shouldn't matter what somebody else thinks, as long, it's my property, as long as I'm following the code. And in this case, I'm here because there is a violation of code with respect to the fence. So
Could you just point out, I can't see exactly where that easement, where does it start? Yeah, the laser.
Oh, here.
Or something.
Can you see this? So
Maybe go back to the.
previous slide. So the lake bottom irrigation easement extends along this entire back here of the property. And then the power lines are kind of roughly, this area here. You can see the shadow, but who knows what angle the satellite took the picture, whether or not the shadow actually is the correct. I think one of the photos that I provided has the easement overlaid a little bit better. I don't know if that's included here in the presentation, but yeah.
Looks like the entire east half of the property is covered by.
It is, yes. Yeah. If you go back to the previous, this corner right about here is about where the edge of the easement is. Yeah. So that kind of dictates where the house is. So again, just out of ignorance, I guess, not knowing the code, the fence was put in place where it is to try to maximize what space I have available for a private area while still providing a significant amount of what I would consider a front yard. So effectively in my mind, I'm creating a backyard in my side yard just because of the shape of the lot, right? The way that it is now, from the fence to the edge of my property, that's 140 feet roughly, which is substantially more than the front yards in my, front areas in my previous neighborhood. And that's probably about the same size, actually, the front yard, if you would consider this the front yard, as other property homes in the current subdivision. So for what it's worth, right?
Ryan,
Yeah,
how large is the lot?
it's a little over 3/4 of an acre.
Thank you.
Now, with respect to the code, I do concede that it is in violation of code. I understand what the code is now. And so I guess one of my reasons for coming here tonight, I went back and reviewed all the minutes from the board. I'm like, has there ever been an occurrence where they're discussing a fence? And I never really found any minutes of it, for years talking about a fence. So it seems pretty trivial, but in my mind, it's not trivial because of the investment that's been put into the fence. And so, I'm left to, try to dissect the spirit of the code as it's written. And so there's kind of two areas that I'm thinking that the code is trying to convey or trying to preserve and protect. And one may be aesthetics. So keeping the fence behind the front of the house for aesthetics. That's pretty subjective. And in this neighborhood, just on the opposite side of the street, there's a whole huge fence line up against the sidewalk. So it's not detracting aesthetically to the neighborhood. And so that leaves safety. Safety for both traffic coming down 1520. So that the street in front of my house is 1520 north. So ensuring safety for traffic flowing down the street, as well as for traffic that is coming off of this little stub street. Making sure that, the visibility is not impacted. As for traffic that's coming down 1520, as I stated before, there's still 140 feet of front yard here, and there's 70 feet of distance between the corner of the fence and my driveway, which is bigger than a lot of people's front yards in total. So in terms of a safety issue with traffic coming down and not being able to see my driveway, I don't feel like it's an issue. It's never been an issue for us, and never had a complaint from anybody feeling like they've had it as an issue. And in the staff report, it was mentioned that I had shown some properties in, if you wouldn't mind going to that photo of the other neighborhood. Yeah. My point here is not to say these should be considered in violation. My point here is to say that these are examples that present the same potential safety issue that are not considered in violation of the code. All right, so you have a fence, for example, you have a fence right here that could potentially be obstructing visibility to this driveway. So traffic that's flowing up this street could, there's potential obstruction of visibility here because of this fence. And so all of these, but that's not in violation of the code, because this is considered a side fence for this house, and which is not related to the house whose driveway is obstructed. And so just in this one neighborhood, there's 13 examples of that same, what you might consider a potential safety issue, the same situation. And there's one house down here, actually in this corner, that is has the same potential obstruction of visibility on both sides of the driveway, just because it has corner lot homes on either side of it. And I think in total, this is only like 40 or 50 feet there. So I could go back to the first image. I think I'm just about finished. Yeah, thank you. So again, there's roughly 140 feet of, in my silly mind, front yard still that has no obstruction from the fence. And, we haven't had any complaint from neighbors directly about the fence, their concerns about safety and visibility. And this corner right here, this is set back. So one of the sections of the code talks about the triangle. I don't remember what the exact terminology is, but there's effectively kind of a triangle that you draw along here that the fence can't protrude into that triangle, just to prevent from, side obstruction for traffic trying to turn off of this street. And that little section of fence there's no issues there with obstructing within that triangle of visibility. So anyway, I appreciate your consideration tonight for granting a variance to my property to allow this fence to remain. It is an odd-shaped lot, and I would just like to preserve what has been there for 8.5 years, and so I appreciate your time. Any questions for me? Thanks, Tom.
So this fence sits directly behind the drive or the sidewalk. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And behind that, it looks like you have some area for your children to play,
That's correct. Yeah,
there's playhouse and
there's a little playhouse right here. There is there's kind of an outdoor gathering area with some raised concrete flower beds and some flat work here, some pavers. There's trees that are established and bushes that are established along this area here.
and it looks like on the corner there, you actually looks like maybe the sidewalk, they did cut the corner to make it a
Yeah,
little more visible.
yeah,
around
this
that
was
corner.
cut back. So if if the house, well, I don't know, it's all hypothetical. But if, assuming that there was no violation of this front fence, this section here would not be in violation because of the, there is a specific section of the code that says the corner has to be set back to not obstruct visibility. And the fence was done that way just out of, intuition, I guess, just to make it more safe.
Yeah, it's a little bit confusing because this looks like it's the side of your house. That's not in front of your house.
Mhm.
It's to the side of your house.
Yeah, that's the way in my mind, that's the way that we approached it, is because it's odd shaped. In the staff report, they said if the house was placed here, then a fence could be along this entire thing without any issue.
Questions? Thank you. Oh, we do. Oh,
Laura,
sorry,
you have a
go ahead.
question?
Just really quick, has anybody ever talked to you about your fence in your neighborhood? Has anybody?
No. I've got lots of neighbors here that would have comment too.
I asked him where he got it because I really liked it.
Any other questions for me?
No, I think with that, we will open it up for public comment.
Okay, thank you.
So we kind of ask, 2-minute comments. Anyone wants to come up, kind of state their name and address for the record, and then proceed with your comment.
I'm Justin Grover. I live on 1434 West Lakeshore Drive, or lot 27 on your map. I took a lot of inspiration from Ryan and his fence and built mine. It looks a lot like the one you see on the bottom. If you, I have two stories that I'll tell. First is if you've ever lived, I don't know if you've ever lived under high voltage power lines. It's an interesting experience. Before we moved here, we had lived further down the lines away, and there's a couple things that you have to always know. One, it's always crackling. You always can hear the crackling. But two, if you get up above just a few feet off the ground, anything metal will shock you. We had a kids' playhouse, and I was up on a ladder putting some new shingles on it, and my knees were getting shocked with the power. And so when they talk about like, oh yeah, there's power lines over and it's unusable, it truly is. You can't do a lot with it. And so we all just have kind of viewed that as a side yard. The second one is as much as I love Ryan and his landscaping, I really don't want to see his backyard. I just don't want to see it. So that's all I have to say. Hopefully that's helpful.
I live a little further down those, and there's a park just off 620 North there that's right underneath the power lines, and similar problem on the play equipment.
Yeah. It hurts.
Good evening, Michael Taylor. I own the lot, which is 2 lots to the east of the Okelberrys. And I'm down there. It's a lot. I'm down there at least 2 times a week, spring, summer, fall, weeding and maintaining the lot. I have countless times turned on that corner, driven in front of their home. And what I can address is that there is no safety issue. You can see traffic coming both ways. So it's aesthetically, it's pleasing to the eye, and safety wise, I hope you would take into consideration that there, at least in my way of thinking, there is no negative safety issue by the way he has his fence. Thank you.
I drove by this afternoon and was lurking a little bit, and my thought was, any aesthetic loss that may be there is more than made up for by that rock in front door. You've got bright lime green. Any other comments?
My name is Mary Valgardson, and I live directly west of the Okelberrys. You can see my shop right there next door. I think it's interesting that this has come up after so many years. And as a neighbor, it has never crossed my mind that that would be a problem for a safety issue at all. And as you look at what I consider the Okelberrys' front yard, this is just a side yard. They've got lots of lawn and beautiful landscaping in the front, what I consider the front of their house, and their fence doesn't obscure the front of their home in any way. And again, I don't see it as a safety issue. We built our home before Okelberrys built theirs, and never have I thought that it was a safety issue, or did I think that it looked unsightly in any way. Anyway, that's what I have to say.
Hi, I'm Stuart Hagberg, and I live just east of that. So where the stub street is up there is where my home adjoins that road. And I lived there for almost 6 years, and can attest that the fact that when we take a left turn out there, looking to the left where the fence is, it doesn't also pose any risk for us, as we've experienced in all these years. Certainly understand that laws are laws. I'm sure that whatever you decide, the Okelberrys they're law-abiding citizens and would it comply. But certainly this seems like a complaint that maybe is unnecessary in this case. But certainly that will be your decision. But wanted to at least voice my support of the Okelberrys and the idea that it seems out of place, unnecessary to require that they adjust the fence or the fence line itself. We also hate to see their dog jump over a 3-foot fence, because he certainly could. But anyway, that's just another comment. But thank you.
Just like to.
Okay, there's been quite a bit of commentary about safety. I read through this. I'm not seeing that the city's comments are addressed. Is that correct?
Yeah, so as far as safety goes, I don't know that this is the issue that at hand. So on the corner, we have a clear vision ordinance that requires that a 3-foot fence is the maximum height on the corner. So if this were a backyard and not a front yard, that corner there, I think, meets the clear vision standard. So that's not what we're looking at today. As far as safety goes, we're just looking at, do they meet the requirements for a variance to be granted to allow a fence in the front yard to be taller than what we require for everybody else?
That was my understanding. I wanted to clarify because the neighbors brought up safety repeatedly. We won't bring that into scope. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, we're not saying the fence is in violation of the clear vision. It's just the height is not in conformance with the existing code.
Thank you.
As far as vision, I don't know, when I was turning back onto Geneva Road to head back to my place, there is a backyard that backs onto Geneva Road right there that's got a high 6-foot fence, and that blocks more of a view onto a busier road anyway. But again, irrelevant to maybe. Do we now we get jump into deliberations? Yeah. Anyone want to start us off?
I love going first on this. I love skewing everyone's opinion. No. So I guess staff is correct. It's we as the Board of Adjustment try and be as emotionless, like no emotions thing. It's just we try and focus on those 5 criteria. And from what as I'm going through all the criteria, you guys are all good on the last 4. And then the question, which he also brought up, was the hardship. And for me, as I'm going through all of this, staff didn't find hardship, but where I see it, where there's the easement, power lines, and then also the use, the buildable, like, is it able to be built in that area? It suddenly becomes less of a front yard to me, in my perception of what it is, and it becomes more of what a backyard would be. But because of the easement and the power lines and the lack of building, I find that to be a reasonable hardship to consider it not a front yard, or to consider it not, even if somebody tried, they couldn't build there to make it into a front yard if they split the lot or anything like that. So for what I am interpreting, what is a front yard, I find in my conclusions that if we find a hardship as a board that we can agree on, then it meets all the rest of the criteria to approve the variance. So that's my thought, is that the easement, the power lines, everything make it into a unique hardship that is different than a normal home. And so it would be considered a different scenario. And those are my initial thoughts.
I have some thoughts as well. When this property was purchased, the easements pre-existed. Certainly I can appreciate with the way that the house had to be set because of those easements. That all goes into planning of a home. My opinion is different. And that is in that this is a large lot. Someone has complained. I don't know who, and that remains, we can assume or not assume, and it's probably safe to not assume. There has been something submitted to the city, whether that came from the city or wherever. As I mentioned previously, safety is not the issue. It is not for us to determine what a front. I can appreciate we don't determine what the front city zoning does, and if we want to encode, way to change that is to be active and change it through coding. So
one comment on that is, we don't decide what code is for what is front yard or what is allowed, but that's why we're the Board of Adjustment. If it meets this, allowed to change. So that's the difference, that we can say this is a unique situation, and we can. What is different than
I certainly understand that.
Okay.
However, it is a front yard by zoning and coding. And so none of us want to wipe out a child's playground. None of us want to do that. We also want to take into consideration that precedents, if there are other properties that want to do that, we need to consider, are we willing to, well, it's not before us right now. This is just what's before us. But the property was purchased and built knowing that those easements were there. And it's so unfortunate when you invest into something and get this kind of a letter. So I think we should take that into consideration.
You know, where I'm sitting on this right now is that absolutely it is, you know, a front yard, you know, finding of fact there. I think I agree. And yet I do think that there's, you know, enough that's unique about this property that I'm, you know, very happy to consider. You know, what Wes was talking about, that literal enforcement of front yard bylaw requirements would be more of a hardship on this property than it would be on others making this, I'm sitting at least.
I would like to know a little bit more about how unique that is. And I did not, from the staff report, I didn't get how many of the lots in this particular would have this easement or by that.
Drawing here that there's no other front yards that
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see this. So the center of the power line runs along here. And to the west is LDS church property. And then to the east, these are people's backyards. So they have a 60-foot easement into their backyard that they can't build underneath. Whereas I have a full 120-foot swath in my yard that I can't build on. And again, that's their backyard.
Yeah, it looked like to me that you actually have over half, probably about 60% of your yard is underneath that easement.
Do you know what the average acreage is per lot in your neighborhood?
I don't off the top of my head. Half acre.
half acres with a handful being maybe quarters or.
Yeah. Again, this is just my opinion that the usage of my property, what I would desire to do with it, shouldn't have any impact of I guess the size of somebody else's lot and then being able to use their lot to its fullest extent shouldn't impact, me being able to utilize my lot to its fullest extent, right? Just because I have a larger lot doesn't mean that, well, that's okay because you have a larger lot, more than your neighbors that have a half acre lot. I don't really
Lori,
feel
it seemed like you had something else you were.
Oh, I was just, I was kind of trying to assess the uniqueness of this. And as I'm seeing it here with the plat map, it's clear that there is no other lot in the division. I know that there's actually no precedent necessarily. It's my first week on the Board of Adjustment, so I'm clarifying some things for my own understanding. So I do see a unique here. And I also appreciate the fact that code is there for a reason, but we're then perhaps an aesthetic rationale for.
Having driven around the neighborhood a little bit today, I think am I right in saying that there really are several of these 6-foot vinyl fences that do abut, the sidewalk? It doesn't seem like it's uniquely, unsightly that you simply don't have a full straight line of front yards.
Yes, there's a full 6-foot fence along here. There's a full 6-foot fence along here. And as you mentioned, along Geneva Road, there's a full 6-foot fence that extends clear down off the map along Geneva Road. So, and that's primarily due to the fact that this house is facing east on this road. This front yard faces this way, this way, this way. So, this isn't the only fence, I guess, that's extends out to the sidewalk along 1520 North.
Yeah. I also, just an additional thought. I mean, you made a good point that he bought it with the easements, knowing the easements bought it. But in that case, you could have come to the Board of Adjustment 8 years ago and requested a variance and said, hey, I'd like a 6-foot thing. I have a unique situation. which would totally be within your purview. And then we could approve that beforehand, just based on the hardship and everything. So, yeah. So, but and yeah, most people don't know, right? So, but yeah, I think that what we're trying to decide is, going back to, and, you know, I know that there's differing opinions about, the neighborhood is important. But to answer your guys' question, it is your property, and that's what we're discussing. And we're not setting a precedent. We're just looking at the base facts, and does it meet the criteria of a hardship? Sorry, I ate one of these Hershey things and it's stuck in my throat. It does meet, in my mind, it does meet that, and that hardship, because it's unique, it's unbuildable. The front yard is not so much of a front yard to me. And so I, that's kind of where I'm at with the power lines and the easements. That I'm ready to kind of forward if you guys want to talk more about that, but.
I just wanted to say that I have a lot of the same feelings. This is very unique to this area. Almost every one of the rest of the lots that has the easement on it, its backyards, and still have the high fences on it, and doesn't seem to be a problem at all. This is a corner lot. It makes it very unique in that there's only so much that can happen on this lot. I think he's tried to do the best he could with this lot. Beautiful lot. It's well groomed. It's taken care of. A lot of people try to hide things behind. I think he's trying to hide his opportunity for his children, his family, to have a place that they can secured and away from everybody seeing what they're doing. Front of the house is fully exposed. Have clear view of it. There's no problems there. I think that while the letter of the law is being imposed on a little bit, the spirit of the law, I don't feel like we're hurting the spirit of the law by allowing that to stay where it is.
Well, let me also say this, which may surprise all of you because you must be. So this is what else I think. I think that the way that the developer created your lots was because yours is quite large. The lot size does matter in the narrative to me. Your lot is quite large because that entire half of your lot is completely unbuildable. So I would agree. I agree with everything that you're saying. I like that we can consider both sides of those arguments, but 50% of your property is unbuildable. And even if you have a 5-acre lot, if you've got an easement and you have to have an 800 square foot house on the one buildable corner, that's quite a dramatic example. But your lot, in essence, is you can't do anything with it. It is lovely. It's well groomed. That's not the question at hand. But as a parent, you don't want to wipe out your children's childhood. And that's what we would do, with the exception. I'm assuming you have children because you got a playhouse there. So I'm ready to make my decision. Certainly I have come to a decision as well. And I can appreciate that's a unique circumstance.
Wes, do you want to
Yeah, I'll make
get that in for us? Or?
Yeah, I'll just make a motion. Yeah. So I'm making a motion to reject the staff recommendation to deny the variance, and to approve the variance based on meeting the 5 criteria outlined in the city code.
I'll second that.
We're ready for a vote. Why don't we start voting with Jennifer, and we'll move across.
Okay, I vote to approve the requested variance.
Aye. Then
Yeah. Aye. Wes Marriott. Yeah. Aye.
Andrew Rennick, aye.
Tom Halliday, aye.
Laurie Urquiaga, aye.
Hey, with that, we have overturned the staff recommendation and approved the variance. Thank you very much for participating, in this civic process. Many people never do. And we very much are willing to, go through the added steps. We know it's, ending. So thank you.
And congratulations. It's not, I'll be honest, it's not very often that we go against the staff. So congratulations.
Do we need a move to adjourn? Or do you do that?
So I will officially move to adjourn the meeting for November 2022.